50 facts that people make on TBC packs. So this is some video about some TBC facts. Okay, let's give it a look.
50 Burning Crusade facts. It was the first expansion to ever be delayed by about 1 month, meaning it released in January 2007. The only other expansion to have been delayed was Shadowlands. Perhaps one of those was more worth the wait than the other. There was a small event before the TBC pre-patch at the Dark Portal, where you simply went over there, defeated a few enemies, and got a tabard called the Tabard of the Protector. To this day, this still remains a very rare tabard.
No, actually, I had this one, and then my account got hacked because I accidentally put my my password information into a keylogging website because they said they said my account was being hacked, and I had to put in my password into a website to like make it unhacked, and then I put it in, and then I lost all my shit. Yeah, I got like an email from like Blizzard.business whatever the heck when I was a kid, and I was like, oh my god, I was so worried, so I logged into the website, I put in my password, and then a few minutes later I couldn't log into my WoW account.
The Fel Reaver has to be one of the most memorable enemies in the game when you first step foot in Outland. Blizzard tried to kind of bring it back in Wrath of the Lich King with the Storm Giant in Howling Fjord and in Cataclysm with the Whale Sharks, but no.
The Whale Sharks are cool. I will say that. Shout out to Vashir, but the Fel Reaver is so iconic.
Nothing quite came close. TBC was the first expansion to feature heroic dungeons, and they were really difficult on release. In fact, I'd say only Cataclysm had more challenging content, but for players coming from vanilla and most of them being undergeared, they were really getting thrown into the meat grinder here. TBC was the only expansion to so prominently feature achievements in order to progress through raid tiers.
I don't like people always show this picture, but I really don't think it's as bad as people make it up. Like if you're farming your Prebis, if you've quested and farmed your Prebis and done your dungeons, you kind of get it done just by doing that. It's not that bad, right? Like it is a lot, but it's a lot less than you would think, right? Because like you just do it while playing the game anyway, right? Jack, thank you for the 100 bits.
Had to complete tons of quests and heroic dungeons.
For alts though, true, yeah. But I am mainly, for alts it's kind of annoying, that's true.
And raids in order to progress. The content was extremely front-loaded in TBC. You could technically access up to Mount Hyjal straight away from when the game released, though very few guilds could actually clear tier 5 in order to get there. Speaking of tier 5, the 2 M bosses, Lady Vash and Kael'thas, were considered extremely difficult originally, and both—
I think Kael'thas is my favorite TBC fight. I don't know, I hate the room because of the colors, they're like really bright, but it's a really cool boss.
Originally, and both of them had to undergo significant nerfs in TBC's first major patch before a number of guilds started to be able to clear them. TBC had 2 big legendaries, both of which were, well, completely random whether or not you got your hands on them. Those were the Twin Blades of Azinov from Illidan, as well as Thoridal the Star's Fury from Kil'jaeden. In both vanilla as well as future expansions, Blizzard usually tied a pretty large quest chain to you getting an orange weapon, and it wasn't until Legion where legendaries just started randomly dropping again, albeit from a much wider scope of content. A lot of TBC's content has found its way back into the World of Warcraft once again, such as Karazhan being remade as a 2-part dungeon in Legion, Kael'thas, Lady Vash, Illidan, and even Kil'jaeden have all also come back as either allies or future bosses in later expansions. TBC definitely had some memorable characters, and we'll probably be seeing some of them again.
Dude, I swear man, whenever I see Legion clips, it just feels like the end of WoW. Right? It feels like the crescendo when you have Kil'jaeden and like everything, like Sargeras and everything. It just felt like the end. Like this was the end of WoW, and then it kept going, right? Yeah, it was like the big freaking Sargeras shows up and you imprison him, right?
Plenty of pop culture references in TBC, such as Oprah Wind Fury over in the Temple of Tel Hamat, or Harris Pilton in Shattrath. At the start of TBC, the Ring of Trials in Nagrand had tornadoes which would spawn in randomly and knock players about, leading to a huge RNG element in this arena. Paladins on each faction gained a different seal. Alliance got Vengeance and Horde Seal of Blood. During TBC Classic, both factions were given both seals to address issues with a disparity in performance between between Ret Paladins on both factions. Speaking of Ret, TBC gave rise to the seal twisting style of gameplay for Ret Paladins, which I find as though people really love or hate it. In short, it involves you changing your seal just as you land an auto attack, which enables you to proc the on-hit effects from both seals at the same time. And if you wanted,
I will say that this does seem like an annoying thing to play with.
To do damage as a Ret Pally, you really had to do this. Shamans also both got different spells. Well, technically they did anyway. They were called Bloodlust.
Seal twisting was amazing. I never played Paladin, but it looks annoying to me. But maybe it's fun to play. It's probably really fun to get the procs though. Like when you get a good seal twist proc and you just do so much damage, it's probably very satisfying.
Heroism. Although they did the exact same thing, I guess Blizzard wanted to keep some kind of faction identity tied to those classes, even though they had just made them available for both factions. During TBC, Heroism and Bloodlust would not reset between raid wipes, and there was also no exhaustion debuff applied when you used either of them. This meant you could rotate Shamans mid-combat into a certain group and chain together Bloodlust effects, so that your—
This is the thing I hated most about TBC, man. Fucking, like, group meta, you had to, a swapping shot,
top geared DPS could maximize their damage. TBC gave rise to one of the earliest encounters in World of Warcraft where you really had to min-max. Muru, the penultimate boss of the Summer, had a ton of ads which you really had to keep on top of. If the ads—
This boss was fucking fun as a warrior, man. The cleave you could do, it was so fun. I love this boss.
Or you fell behind on damage, you just wiped very fast. Drums of Battle also became meta on this fight, where 4 people per group would have to use this leatherworking item to maintain a party-wide haste buff. This was also changed in TBC Classic. The entire Sunwell raid was not open at launch, and you could only actually get up to Brutalis. Then the Eridar twins Muru and Kil'jaeden were each released a few weeks apart. TBC, I find, had some really polarizing zones. In my experience, if you ask people about the best World of Warcraft zones, Nagrand comes up pretty often, and for the worst, you hear Blade's Edge Mountain quite a bit as well.
I don't think Blade Edge is a horrible zone. It's not the best leveling zone, but I think it's a pretty cool zone, like with all the Gruul stuff and like the dragons like impaled on all the spikes because of the grunts and shit. I think it's a cool zone. It's just not an optimal playing place, right? Like to play.
In quite a bit as well. Ashes of Allah, in fact, doesn't drop off of Allah, but instead the final boss in Tempest Keep, Kael'thas Sunstrider. Content such as Hellfire Peninsula and the Black Temple were originally planned to be part of vanilla, but there were simply so many things Blizzard wanted to get in the game, they just didn't have time. So eventually both of these became bits of TBC content. Early in TBC, you couldn't summon in Netherstorm due to Netherstorm's chaotic energies making summoning magically impossible. This was removed in a later patch and was probably there so you were forced to buy flying to access Netherstorm dungeons, which were needed for achievements in order to raid. TBC was the last expansion where healing and damage were split into separate stats. However, in a later patch, any healing gear would also give 1/3 of their healing power as spell damage, just so doing stuff solo as a healer wasn't quite as painful. Expertise was added as a new stat, which would replace certain bonuses that weapon skill used to affect, such as—
It's kind of just weapon skill. I mean, that's what expertise really is. It's just a stat for weapon skill.
A chance your attacks to be dodged or parried. Weapon skill was still something that you had to level up, but it just didn't quite matter as much as it used to. TBC Arena had a lot of RNG effects, including heartbeat resist, meaning that long duration CCs such as Polymorph or Fear could randomly end early. You also had Storm Herald and Mace Stun from warriors, meaning that each of their attacks was rolling the dice on whether you got stunned. And you also had stun resist, that was a thing too, and it could completely change the flow of an arena game in a single moment. An Orc warrior could have, for example, 15% stun resist from their racial, 15% from talents, 5% baseline resist, and 5% from a meta gem.
So fucking dumb, man. Like,
have fun dealing with that as a rogue. At the start of TBC, resilience didn't reduce mana draining effects, meaning that comps that aim to their opponents with hunters or warlocks could be very effective. Shadow priests were known as mana batteries thanks to their new talent Vampiric Touch, which would grant all party members mana based upon their damage done, which was great for healer groups or arcane mages. Beast Mastery Hunters went from being more or less just a leveling spec in vanilla to a top tier DPS in TBC. That was mainly thanks to pets now scaling with their master stats alongside a bunch of other buffs. Cloak of Shadows didn't have a 100% chance to resist spells after it was used, it was only 90%, meaning sometimes you cloaked and that mage just hit you with polymorph anyway. The infamous known Millhouse Mana Storm was first introduced in Burning Crusade, and he's one of World of Warcraft's longest running reappearing characters. He's first freed from a prison in the Arcatraz before making his ever so memorable speech and helping you out with the encounter. Shatrath was the first neutral city for both Horde and Alliance, and the faction capital for both for TBC. What it was renowned for back in the day was having absolutely terrible FPS because there were just so many people on the screen at the same time. Oftentimes players would point their camera at the ground just so they could move around without lagging as much. You can ride directly off the lift instead of waiting on the Scryer's Rise in Shatrath and live the fall.
But
don't try this on the Eldor Rise though.
Yeah, really odd that they didn't give it an auction house. That's actually, yeah, that good point, yeah.
There is kind of a hidden way into Nagrand from the Eldor Rise called the High Path. I say hidden way because it's in plain sight, but I feel as though nobody ever uses it, and it can be a nice alternate way to get into the zone when leveling. The Scryers and Eldor were new factions for TBC where the player could choose to side with only one of them.
I mean, I will say, man, I feel like Scryer's the coolest, man, okay? Like, they're just cooler, but it even sounds more cool. Like, the Scryer. Right? And you got Eldor. Nah, Scryer's cooler.
This would open up different quests and rewards, and these rewards were quite good early on into the expansion, and it was a choice that did impact your character, but as time went on the key difference...
Eldor is better in chance though. Not wrong, but Scryer still sounds cooler.
Between the two were the shoulder enchants, even though they were still quite similar to one another. Meaningful choice of factions done better than what happened in Shadowlands, to be honest. Back in the day, people often had issues with the fact that TBC greens replaced raiding gear from vanilla, which...
Yeah, dude, you go from fucking Nax gear, and you go into you go into the first zone in Outland, and you just replace it with a random green from a quest. It's kind of funny, but I mean, it's a new expansion, so obviously gear will be better.
The time was probably true for the vast majority of people because basically nobody cleared original Nax Rammus. In TBC Classic, however, when loads more people had cleared Nax, in some
some of the Nax gear you would replace with Prebis. That is true. I'm saying like if you have like normal gear, right? Like Nax gear could probably last you up to, I mean, I wouldn't say heroic dungeons, but like you would at the late TBC dungeons, you would replace your Nax gear like with blues, right?
Cases that gear was so powerful, it was used all the way up to getting upgrades in TBC's opening tier. Burning Crusade had two official world bosses, Doomlord Kazak and the Doombringer. These two bosses had some very nice drops and would spawn on long timers. This meant that top guilds would always be on the lookout for them to spawn, and they would appear in no time at all. And of course, getting a world boss down was especially difficult on PvP servers thanks to other players disrupting you. Oh, and of course everyone had flying by this point in time, so they could just drop out the sky right on your head. Speaking of flying, it was first introduced in Burning Crusade. However, regular flying was so slow.
60%.
You only moved at 60% speed in the air, which is the same speed as your level 40 mount that you got in vanilla. Epic flying in comparison was 280% speed, making that upgrade very worthwhile. But the initial cost of the epic flying was extremely high, and it was over 5,000 gold between them.
Bro, why would they? I guess it's like at least you can fly now, right? But 60% speed.
Mount and the riding training. There were also some very prestigious mounts which had a 310% riding speed. These were the gladiator mounts from PvP, as well as the Ashes of Allah. The day when TBC released and the Dark Portal opened was complete chaos for Blizzard. They had to try and filter every server's player base through this small portal into Outland. This led to huge amounts of world PvP, lag, disconnections, and memories as well. In future expansions, Blizzard would offer a choice of starter zones so that players would organically split themselves.
6 FPS. I'm just looking at the FPS count. My man has 6 FPS.
up until they sent everyone into garrisons at the same time at the start of Warlords of Draenor, and some people got stuck there for days on end. The Burning Crusade originally was a huge success as a follow-up to Vanilla, and saw sub-growth consistently over the entire expansion. By the end of it, it had 11 or so million subscribers. Whilst many classes saw a bunch of updates in TBC, not all of them changed in playstyle that much. Warlocks still just basically press Shadowbolt on single target, and unfortunately, that also pulled ahead of their fire spec alongside their new spell Incinerate. But they did have a very powerful new AoE spell in Seed of Corruption where multiple enemies were present. During TBC and all the way up to Cataclysm in fact, only druids who had progressed the epic Flight Form quest far enough could summon the bonus boss Anzu in heroic Sethic halls. The reason why is they needed a certain item from that quest chain to summon him. Of course, Anzu has always dropped the mount as long as he's been in the game, but seeing this mount at all, or even just not on a druid in TBC, was extremely rare. Group-wide buffs were a big thing in TBC. You still had your raid buffs, of course, like Power Word Fortitude, Mark of the Wild, all of that, but tons of classes had buffs that only worked for their specific group, such as Heroism,
This was the worst. Like, this was my main gripe with TBC raiding, man. Like, the raid groups had to be so specific if you wanted to, like, actually do well damage, right? Like, you gotta have a feral, you gotta have a shaman, and in the caster groups, oh, you gotta have a shadow priest, you gotta have this and that. Like, it's so annoying.
Moonkinora, leader of the pack, and so on. The weird exception to this was survival hunters, who applied a debuff to their target when they crit.
Of course, that's a fucking MMO group. Yeah, bro, group play, bro. Okay, I don't think. You know what? I disagree with you, Loki the Beast. You know, I disagree. It's fucking annoying, man. Okay, like. I do like that each class brings something to the table, but like managing all the it was horrible. Okay, it was just horrible.
Which scaled with how much agility they had, meaning they would aim to gear to maximize this debuff's power. At the start of TBC, heroic dungeons each needed you to have revered with a certain reputation in order to buy the key to access them, and if you wanted to raid, you had to do this as achievements were interconnected with a bunch of heroics.
It wasn't that bad. Were you a raid leader, or were you managing anything, Citizen Doc, or were you just showing up for raids? Yes? Alright, fair enough. I thought it was annoying.
Reputation requirement was later changed down to Honored, which was much easier to get through just questing without any additional grind. TBC introduced a brand new profession, jewel crafting, which allowed players to socket gems into their gear to modify their stats. At the start of the game though, only rare quality gems were available to craft, and it wasn't until tier 6, Mount Hyjal and Black Temple, where players could begin to farm epic gems from those raids. Later still, once the Sunwell was out, there became an epic gem vendor, at which point prices for them came down fast. There was a way, however, to get epic gems right from day one of TBC. Heroic dungeon bosses had a chance to drop epics, which had basically every single stat combo in the game, and that of course made some of them BIS. And almost as a mercy to players, these gems were made unique, so you could only equip one of course, and they were in most cases marginally better than the rare ones, as most classes just wanted to stack a single stat such as attack power, spell power, stamina, whatever it may be. Can you imagine a phase 1 TBC where these gems were BIS and non-unique on heroics, which you could only do once a day? That would have gotten real sweaty. TBC was the first expansion to feature the looking for group interface tool. However, it wasn't automated, it didn't teleport you to the dungeon, and to be honest, it just wasn't very useful. What it wanted to achieve is taking people out of spamming their chat and into using the tool, but it just never took off and wasn't popular. Patch 2.
I don't think it is a bad idea though. Like, it's a good way of just like condensing the looking for group into something. Instead of having like a queue system, you group with people that way, right? Yo, Ape, thank you for the Prime, dude.
It just never took off and wasn't popular.
Bulletin board was just better. Yeah. I mean, TBC bulletin board, the add-on that we have in classic TBC was a lot better.
Patch 2.2 added voice chat, which you could turn on to speak to nearby players. It was poorly received due to performance and other issues, however. For the most part, if you were speaking with others, you were using Ventrilo back then. But the idea of proximity chat in World of Warcraft to this day sounds, well, let's just say it wouldn't be for everyone. And finally,
imagine going into Goldshire and there's proximity chat, man. That must be a whole other nightmare, man. Argent Dawn, Goldshire.
The TBC pre-patch started on December 5th, 2006, and the Wrath of the Lich King pre-patch came out on October 14th, 2008, which means overall World of Warcraft's first expansion lasted for a total of 679 days, which is actually on the shorter side if you look at all World of Warcraft expansion durations. And
are expansions that long just in general? That's crazy.
Just as the Burning Crusade had to end, so does this video. So that's 50 random TBC facts for you, ranging from just about every single corner of Outland. I hope you found something new here, and if you want to see a video like this, perhaps for Vanilla or Wrath, I can definitely make that happen. But as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I shall see you all in the next one very soon.
Dude, this is a good video. I like watching this. It's even longer nowadays, though. No, I think they're shorter. I originally wasn't looking forward to TBC Classic, but after revisiting, it's my favorite expansion. It felt incredibly well made and felt like vanilla in some ways. I think what they did really well was that they... obviously, TBC is not vanilla, but it felt like a continuation of vanilla in like a more advanced way of some sort. And I think that's what they nailed pretty well with it. It's not vanilla at all, but it did feel like a continuation of vanilla in a way. In the same way that like Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 is like built upon Diablo 1 in different ways. Whether you like that or not, it's up to you, but yeah, that's how it goes.